last time we got together, someone asked me to expand a little bit on the difference between Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, so forth and so forth. And I was thinking about that, and that really wasn't in line with what we're trying to do here. In other words, I didn't want to just get into some kind of description of the things of that nature. But what really is significant by asking that question is that what really is the Jewish unity and what is the value of Jewish unity? In the sense that when you ask the question, you're basically saying this is something that is part of the Jewish community. In a certain way, or otherwise you wouldn't be interested. Like, no, you're not interested in, let's say, what the difference is between Presbyterianism and Unitarianism and Southern Baptists. It's irrelevant to us. But for some reason we ask that question because it has some significance. And the truth is that the fact is we move between various aspects of the community. We have friends that go to Reform temples, friends go to conservative synagogues, in our families we're interconnected. And we treat them differently. Like if you have a family member who becomes a member of Jews for Jesus, you're a lot more unsure of how to act than if the person is a member of the conservative temple down the street. And that raises a question of what really is the Jewish group. In other words, why is it that we would feel that someone who's a Jews for Jesus we would exclude from the Jewish group, and we have the sense that there are people who are part of Reform Judaism we don't consider to be outside of the group? Now, the simple answer is, well, they believe in Jesus and so forth. But if you take Reconstructionist Jews, there's people who are atheist Jews. Reconstructionist view of God is not personal. So why is it that we're willing to live with that and not willing to live with this and so forth? The fact is that there are actually two books on the market, which one explicitly, one implicitly. The explicit one is by a Reform rabbi at a university in Wales. He's a professor at the university in Wales. He was a Reform rabbi. He's a Reform ordination. The other one is a woman with Reconstructionist ordination from Temple University. She sort of said this more implicitly, that if we are talking pluralism from a Jewish perspective, we're talking pluralism, accepting every form of Judaism, then we should also accept Messianic Judaism as a form of Judaism, except in the Jewish world. If we're going to have, like in Philadelphia, there's actually a day school, Messianic Jewish day school.
Wow.
Okay?
The Messianic meaning
Jews for Jesus.
Not
No. There's Mashiachus, there's Messianic. Okay? There's a distinction, in certain ways. Okay? But the fact is, even the Messianics, this Jewish day school, there are people who do follow certain aspects of Jewish halacha. They'll some of these Messianics will walk around with tzitzis and even some of their wives go to mikvah on a regular monthly basis and so forth. It's absolutely fascinating, and a lot of them say we're biblically kosher because they don't want to go too much respect for the rabbis. We're biblically kosher, but others do things. The point is that I remember once when I was in the States, I was flipping the dial, and there's in the States you have what's called the Christian Broadcasting Network, CBN, and there was a guy there wearing a cousin's clothes with the fancy hat and so forth and so forth. He was conducting a seder, and he was talking how at the seder we take the three matzahs and we break the middle one. And I don't have to go further. 3, breaking the middle one, you know what they get to with that, right? And a whole bunch of stuff like that. And they like using Jewish ritual and reading this stuff into it. But the fact is that you have this Jewish day school, but this Jewish day school, or this Jews for Jesus day school, obviously they're not going to get funding from UJA. So the argument is why don't they get funding? Well, why do you fund Reconstructionist day schools? Okay, or Reform day schools? Or why does a Reform person finance Orthodox day schools or whatever?
And who decided to draw that line?
That's the issue. That's the issue. Now, I would think I can cast around. The truth is that's what I want to get to a little bit, in the sense that where do we draw the line? That was a big issue within Orthodoxy, but in a certain way, at the core of that is to understand what is the group. What is this grouping? And just to highlight this historically, what we're doing in history is absolutely unique. Okay, in terms of Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox Judaism, and trying to maintain, one nation, the UJA's approach to one nation. That's a very unique undertaking that has occurred in the last 200 years. Historically, when you broke away in a religious way from the mainstream, you were basically ostracized by the community. You were kicked out, okay? And the other group would want to be kicked out from the community. So think about this in terms of historically. So let's say, take Spinoza. Okay, now it's true Spinoza was excommunicated, but Spinoza had basically, he knew he left the community. He was no longer going to be a believer in Torah, so he wasn't Jewish. Now, he wasn't Christian either. That's what made him a very interesting figure. That's why he's an interesting figure, because people say he's the first secularist, even though he wasn't pure secularist, but he's the first non-denominational or whatever. But he knew that was outside the Jewish community. If Spinoza was around today, he'd be part of the community. It's a unique aspect of the community. Karaites had to form their own community. And there was a tremendous distinction. Now, the truth is that in Egypt there was a little bit more of a friendly relationship between the Karaites and the Rabbinites. But it was perceived that there were two separate communities, but there was a certain amount of interaction. In the Crimea, where there was another Karaite community, there was absolutely no interaction. There was somewhat hostility. And the amount of lack of interaction in the Crimea is when the Nazis, came to the Crimea, they couldn't figure what these Karaites were, because they weren't acting like Jews, but they were doing other strange things. And they went to the Jews and said, "Are those guys Jews?" And the Jews said no. Now, the argument is they said no because they really didn't see them as Jews, or they said no because, listen, why should we put them to this?
So what happened? They leave them alone?
Yeah, the Nazis left them alone, from my understanding. They left the Karaites alone. Now, the truth is, under the law of return in Israel, Karaites are included in the law of return, which is an interesting idea. But the point is that's basically it. There was a lot of basically, if you weren't this, you're outside of the community. And it was very strong definitions. This is this community, that's that community. What we're doing now historically is absolutely remarkable. We are creating a Jewish community that is attempting to include a pluralistic viewpoint. Okay, and we work within that perception of the community. And the question is, how can we understand that? What's the basis of that? Now, what I decided to look up for what I wanted to start this discussion on was on Yehoshaphat HaMelech. Okay, Yehoshaphat HaMelech was a tzaddik. He was one of the kings of Yehuda. And the fact is that Yehoshaphat he made peace between the Yehuda and Yisrael. Okay, the king of Yisrael, and he actually became an ally of Achav. Achav, we've discussed before, was one of the greatest Rishayim in Jewish history. He was perhaps perceived to be like Mr. Evil King, and Yehoshaphat was made a treaty. In fact, it seems that Yehoshaphat's son married Achav's granddaughter. So there was an attempt of creating connections. So the question exists is, why does Yehoshaphat do that? Now the truth is there's a pasuk in Malachim, and I should have brought Malachim, but there's a pasuk in Malachim that praises Yehoshaphat, and he did all these things for Kodesh Baruch Hu, got rid of all these things. What?
Should I get it?
Yeah. Malachim is all right. Okay. There's what?
Oh, forget.
No, it's Aleph. It's the end of Aleph. There's a pasuk there that says that Yehoshaphat was seen as very, very good in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, except for two things that he did. He didn't get rid of all the bamas. The bamas were the altars spread throughout the country, and he made peace with Yisrael. Okay, so Malvin points out is what was the problem with that is because he made peace with Rishayim. Achav was a Rasha. Yisrael was devoted to idolatry. So it says in the pasuk there. It says like this. Okay, Vayedach b'chol derech asa aviv v'osar mimenu lasos hayashar b'nei Hashem. So Yehoshaphat went in the way of Asa, his father, who was also a tzaddik, right? And he did not move aside to do what is straight, Yashar b'nei Hashem. Okay, except for two things. Habamat lo saru, he did not remove the individual altars. He tried to some extent, but he did not remove the whole thing. Okay? Now, it's interesting because at this point in time, he got rid of the idolatry, but he kept the altars. So they were doing this without idolatry. But still, there's the issue of Bamot. You should have there's one place to sacrifice. That was the best place. But people continued sacrificing. V'yashlim Yoshaphat in Melech Yisrael, and Yehoshaphat made peace with the king of Israel, who was Achav, right? And and this commentary over here, that he was rebuked for making peace, and there's a pasuk in Divrei Yamim. Did you? I'm just reading the English here because there's commentaries in English. Did you go to aid the wicked one, and do you love those who hate the Lord? Because of this, the Lord is angry with you. That's a pasuk from Divrei Yamim. The fact is that there was a strong feeling that you cannot make peace with someone who is a person who does averus, a person who does sin. And Yehoshaphat, who was one of the great kings of the Jewish people, tzaddik, he was criticized for making peace with Achav. Okay, and he was trying to create a sense of unity in the Jewish world, and yet you made peace with evildoers, and that's that for that he was critiqued. There's actually, and the truth is, I tried to spend today trying to find it. The fact is, but I didn't. But I saw another medrash that says that on a certain way, Yehoshaphat was actually praised for trying to make peace with Achav. That the fact that there's a value in peace, and there's concepts and there's a concept that says that trying to unite Bnei Yisrael is worthwhile in peace.
But you're talking about peace with evildoers as opposed to peace. Plurality,
No, he's talking about evildoers. He's talking about idolatry. He's not talking about evildoers like he's not talking about Jews outside of. He's talking about non-Jews, not making peace with non-Jews.
No, but still, like evil, is that a language that we could use for here when we're talking about different denominations?
So you're raising another question. The point is, what really is the evil? Is it defined by monotheism or not? The fact is that I just discussed that with my chat class, what the relation is between monotheism and morality. Okay? But the fact is what is the relationship? Now, the point is what you're saying is that, hey, the guy's polytheist, but he's a really nice guy, I'm not going to have that strong negative emotions towards him. Right? The truth is, though, is that on the surface it seems from the language that polytheism is supposed to be the problem. Okay, we're supposed to hate idolaters, and I say it in those terms. Now the truth is, though, is we're also people who have sort of benefited from the relationship, or the relationship between morality and belief. We have a bit of a question with also from what you're saying, because there's a Jewish historian. One of the major medieval Jewish historians, I can't remember if it was Agus or Katz or whatever, says that one of the reasons the Jews kept running into problems in Christian Europe was that they got kicked out of one country, so they went to a new place. They came to this new place. They said, hey, we just want to be nice guys. We're just going to really treat the people around here nicely, and it should develop into good relationships. So they went out of their way to try and just naturally be nice and so forth and so forth. So what would you have? You'd have a Jewish woman living beside a non-Jewish woman. This non-Jewish woman is giving birth. And this Jewish woman happens to know midwifery, and is a midwife. She goes in and helps this non-Jewish woman, and she's remarkable, helps them out. Then after the kids, she takes the other kids and takes care of them. And for the weeks after this birth, she's there helping out her neighbor. This neighbor's looking and says, "See, that's unbelievable. This Jewish lady is so tremendous." Now, what happens to this Jewish lady? What happens to this non-Jewish lady? She's been brought up in the church that the Jews are those who killed Jesus, and they're evil, right? And they're all going to hell. Well, she's such a nice woman. She's remarkable. She really came through for me. And she hasn't said anything in return, and she's not. What do you mean she's the devil? What do you mean she's the devil's nation? So she goes back to her priest. She goes back to her priest, and the priest says, "I don't understand why the Jews are going to hell, because I mean, they don't believe in Jesus, fine, but they're really nice people. Why should they be going to hell?" So the priest tries this, and this woman's just going back and saying, "I don't get this." She starts having issues with her religion. Okay, so the priest goes to her bishop and says to the bishop, "We got a problem. These Jews are acting really nice, and the people in my community are saying, I don't get it, causing real problems." So therefore the bishop goes to the archbishop, and the archbishop goes to the cardinal, and they say, "What we got to do is persecute these Jews, try to make their life so miserable to get them away from the people because they're so good." What you're saying is exactly that. If you see someone as evil, but you're defining evil in a moral sense, right? That you see it in terms of their behavior, right? But if you see someone as, let's say, a polytheist, but he's a really nice guy, and he's ethical, and he's worthwhile, you're not going to really get angry at him. If someone who's an atheist, an avowed atheist, walks in and he's a really nice guy and he helps out people and
So in other words, we have a problem with them because they might influence our families. Is that what you're saying?
What? Well, no. The point is that, but you're not going to keep them away so much because they are ethical.
Even the way you describe these polytheists, I have my perspective as Orthodox, but generally, but still, like people who are, let's say, conservative Jews aren't polytheists.
You're right, but
so I'm still trying to get to where this is all.
You're right. The fact is, but let's say you take an atheist. But the atheist is a nice person. You're not going to look upon that person as someone who's. In other words, when I tell you that there's a concept in this pasuk, and it's said in stronger terms in Divrei Hayomim, that you're supposed to hate someone who hates Hashem, which means someone who is an atheist or a polytheist. You're going to look and say, I have problems with that. If you tell me I'm supposed to hate someone who's a mass murderer, I can understand that. If you tell me I'm supposed to hate someone who's really, like, really disgusting human being in terms of the way he lives, in other words. But to tell me I should hate someone who doesn't believe in God, or is a polytheist, but basically acts like a really good person, I think a lot of people would find difficulties with that. That's what you're really getting at. But your argument is when you said they were talking about someone really evil, but your definition of evil is very much in the sense of someone who's like, from our perspective, like a really, like not nice person. I mean, even when you talk about Achav, what he did with Navot, and what he did with stealing the vineyard, that's an indication of something that's immoral, and that really makes him feel bad. But if he was really a wonderful human being who helped out his country and built up his country, he just said, I'm a polytheist, you have a little more problems with it. So the truth is, you're raising a really big issue there, but it's a very powerful issue of what is evil and what's the relation. Now the truth is there seems to be a Meiri that does make a connection between monotheism and morality, and that's a whole different topic. But the fact is the Meiri seems to imply that if you're a polytheist, you will be a barbarian, and if you're a monotheist, it will bring you along to morality. And the fact is, if you're moral, you must have some inkling of monotheism. And the truth is, if you really speak to some people who are atheists today, a lot of times their atheism is against the belief in a God as it's been presented to them by their faith.
Wait, Christopher Hitchens.
Right. In other words, when a person says they don't believe in blood, and this has something to do with my Tribune article, is that a lot of times what I find about atheists is that somehow what they're really rejecting is a vision of God that comes across from a specific faith that they were brought up with. But they may have some inkling of something different out there, okay? But they don't know how to voice it, and that's why they find atheism, whatever else it is. But it's a little bit more. It's much more complex when someone says I don't believe in God. But the truth is that monotheism did affect our moral perspective, okay? But that's the whole thing. Where polytheism basically means you're going to be a barbarian. There's a complete difference in morality between a monotheist morality and what you would call a polytheist quasi-morality. And in certain ways, I know that there's someone who once said this to me. A Rav said, "There's no more idolaters in the world." And you're going to say about Hindus or about other people, they're not really idolaters, right? Because they're moral. Okay, there's something that must come from idolatry that's immoral. So there's that aspect to it as well.
I think most of them, though, when they look at those statues, it's more symbolic. It's
right,
that they
right. There's an early Rishon. I'm trying to remember his name. There's an early Rishon who says about idolatry, minhag avosehem v'yadehem. The custom of their forefathers in their hands. We talk about minhag avoseinu b'yadeinu, that we're following our custom. He says, and you can see from Christmas today, right? Matt Sundin was talking about Christmas. I don't really believe in this stuff, but he was really into Christmas. How many people really, they run there, the Christmas tree, but how many really believe it? They'll even go to midnight mass. But that's why it was such a funny thing when the rector of the United Church of Canada a few years back came back and said he didn't really believe all the stories in the gospel. He's not even sure if Jesus really exists or not. Everyone was like, wow, he's the rector of the United Church of Canada, so forth and so forth. The fact is that, yeah, I'm not surprised. Okay? Well, basically they're arguing that it's just a way of pushing for morality and stuff like that. It's just the way it's done. Most people see their religion as more the form of how they want to do the ritual. There's actually a brochure put out by Liberal Judaism in the 80s. I have it somewhere in my boxes because it really hit me. I have to, I'll find it maybe one year. But it's Liberal Judaism put out a brochure in the 80s. Liberal Judaism, Reform Judaism is the name for Reform Judaism in England. And they asked the question, what's the difference between Unitarianism and Reform Judaism? Well, Unitarianism is the most liberal form of Christianity. So what's the difference between Unitarianism and Reform Judaism? And want to try and guess their answer?
Nothing.
Nothing. There's no difference between Unitarian Christianity and Reform Judaism. It's just that Reform Jews...
Don't they accept Jesus Christ in Unitarian?
The same thing. The same thing. Jesus was just like, he was the guy who told us to love. You're saying some of we don't even know if it was him, but the basic thing is the value. He says the only difference between Unitarians and Reformed Jews is what motif they rather use to express their spirituality. The Reformed Jews like to use a Jewish motif, the menorah or something like that, and Christians like to use a Christian motif.
So then how can they even explain why Mary Jewish? Just be nice. Lots of other, traditions are nice. They don't have a leg to stand on.
No, they have a leg to stand on.
What is it?
They have a leg to stand on. You're right. The fact is that what you're saying is that you shouldn't. Who needs to marry Jewish? Okay.
But they don't need to marry Jewish. They don't have to marry Jewish and Reform.
Yeah. No, they Reform Jews. That's why Reform. Listen.
I heard the rabbi and everything. They don't have to. They accept interfaith, and at least a quarter of the people there were not Jews.
Right.
I don't know. I had my girl. I don't want to go off.
No. The fact is that that's a classic joke, right? How do you know the Jewish kids in the Reform Hebrew school in California? You know how you know?
They have the Gentile name.
They're the ones with the Gentile last names. Right. The fact
The ones
is,
with the Jewish name are not Jewish.
right.
I made an Ashkenazi who wasn't Jewish.
Right. The fact is, but the truth is that you should know that to them they're Jewish. What does it really mean to be Jewish? See, they're not Jewish, but you're looking at it from an Orthodox perspective and saying, hey, they're not Jewish halacha. Ein hachinami, they're not Jewish halacha. What does Jewish mean? Jewish means I wish to do my religion thing with these motifs. So I was brought up. My son meant Sarah Jessica Parker's brother. Posey was his name, right? Anyways, because he was the head of a playwriting program my son was interested in, and they were talking, and my son said, "Keep Shabbos." Of course, we keep Shabbos. And the fact is, he talked like a Jew. The father's Jewish, the mother's not Jewish, but they're brought up as Jews. In their mind, we choose to follow these customs. That's all it means. It doesn't mean you're born to a Jewish mother. What it means is in the same way. We all believe in the one God. Which way do you want to do it? Do you want to do it using this motif or that motif? So you're brought up in a culture that wants to use that motif. So good, that's fine. Okay? And maybe you'll create a new thing, like 30-something, with the menorah and the Christmas tree. You'll mention too. What's wrong with that? So you can bring the Chinese food with the spaghetti and meatballs. You can eat both. It adds more. You have more choice. But the point is that that's, you see, one of the things that's happening from all this. I want to rein it in a little bit. Is that the definition of Jewishness is at the core over here. You're looking at it from a perspective not halachic Jewish. The fact is that that only matters to people who are halacha, right? What's Jewish? Jewish means this. It doesn't mean because you're born to a Jewish mother, not born to. Who cares? This is it. This is what you want. You want to worship God this way, but of course we're all brothers together. We all have the same beliefs, right? And that really allows for the perception of a pluralism or a certain aspect of universal pluralism. It's like we're all human beings. We all really believe in the same thing. You just want to do it your way, and you want to do it your way, and you want to do it your way, and it's fine, it's great culture, and you're into this thing, and I'll respect your way of doing it, and you respect my way of doing it.
That guy who was a Chabad Rabbi, Shlomi, I'm sure you heard of him, Rabbi Shlomi, oh my God.
Zalman Schachter?
Yeah.
Zalman Schachter Shlomi.
Yeah. Where does he stand? Like, is he also in that view? Like, it's all,
I don't know.
Like, he's not really Chabad anymore.
No, he's not. But the fact is, Zalman Schachter Shlomi is a professor in UPenn in Philadelphia. I mean,
and he has a real smicha.
Yes,
right?
It's real smicha from Rabbi or from Chabad. But the fact is that he's much more into mysticism on a much more broader scale. The fact is that university. You see, this is. We are living with a universal perception of God, and what we don't recognize is that of this universal perception of God, what's happening is that people basically say we all believe the same thing, and the only difference is how we want to do our thing.
I think that's what he said.
Right. Well, the truth of the matter goes back to Timothy Leary, back in his work in Harvard and so forth and so forth. There's actually an interesting book I read called The God Gene. You hear about this book called The God Gene? It's an investigation of a gene that makes you religious. What it really says is, it defines religion in a very narrow way. What does it mean to be religious? It means to desire the religious experience. You want to get high on this and so on. That's what Timothy Leary was doing. He was taking religious people and he was saying, hey, with drugs you can have the same experience. Maslow did the same thing when he talked about a certain experience in the brain which goes with religion. It's a very specific definition of religion. Or it's a broad type of it. It basically means you want to have this transcendental spiritual experience. Okay? So they found this God gene is the gene that gives you the thing in the brain that makes you have a good experience like that. If you don't have this gene, then you go to Nepal and you sit there and say, why the heck am I here? You're not having any good experience, you know. If you've ever been with someone, this guy's someone could be having a remarkable experience. So don't you feel it? It's remarkable. The guy suddenly says, no, I don't feel anything. Right? That's a distinction, right? One guy, you know, like, don't you feel the Shabbos? Don't you feel this? And the guy's saying, no. Right? You're not into it. Come on, get me more into it. No, I know. So these guys are saying that because this has a God gene, that guy has a God gene. But these are all methodologies of getting to this one thing, which is the universal religious experience. Now, applying back to our issue, what it really comes down to is the definition. If you define your religion as absolutely unique, and defining it as saying this is it, then you're going to have Osama bin Laden's. This is right, and those guys are infidels. Right? And if you don't accept this belief, it's wrong. You deserve to be killed. But the point we're looking at is saying, well, wait a second. They're nice people. So we're somewhere where we're trying to say, hey, being Jewish is great. In terms of halachic Jewishness, that's the right way to be. But on the other hand, we look at people who are not halach and they're good people, and we say, yeah, that's cool. We feel good about them. And the point is that where does God come into this? The definition of God, the knowledge of God, the strict knowledge of God. So it comes down to is that someone doesn't believe in Torah Misinai or in the definitions of God as we define it within Orthodox Judaism. Okay, how do we relate to such people? Well, should be welcoming. Well, then what does that mean? We're breaking down our own perceptions of God, or we should be strict against them, and then we will not have any pluralism. But the strange thing in the Jewish community is we have this sort of like, we're going to be accepting until you get like Jews for Jesus, and somehow we draw the line there. Why? Why draw the line there? So that's really the issue before us. But I was trying to point out from Yehoshaphat that he was critiqued. But really what you see is a little bit of a dialectic. So Tzaddik, he was critiqued for doing this, but there's a dialectic. And we're living with this dialectic today as Orthodox Jews. On one hand, we are in favor of a certain level of the Jewish community in a encompassing way, right? We identify with the Jewish community as a whole. On the other hand, we have to have this tension with those who do not actually share our faith, and it's somewhat of a tension. Rabbi Sachs wrote a book called One Nation, ? And Jonathan Sachs, the chief rabbi, wrote a book like that, and he deals with this a little bit. He says, are we really one nation? How do we put it together? And the fact is that it is problematic from a philosophical perspective. What really is our philosophy? If you're pluralistic, what usually happens is you take, for example, the rabbi who married, who participated in the ceremony for Clinton. Right? Okay? He's a rabbi by the name of Jim Pinette, who is the director of the Yale Hillel. And I know Jim a little bit, met him years ago. And on the surface, you would perceive him to be an Orthodox guy. Right? Totally halachic in many, many ways. He'll tell you he is a Reform rabbi. And his observance of halacha does not mean he's Orthodox. He observes halacha as a Reform rabbi, and there are many people who are. I remember once I was speaking in Cleveland, and I was staying by a close friend in Cleveland, and I was speaking, and I was doing a luncheon in the shul. Friday night I stayed with my friend, and he invited over this couple. And nice from family and so forth and so forth. He was Rabbi so-and-so, so I was talking to him, and I remember saying to him, so where do you get smicha? So and we were laughing the whole time. We were having a good time, really joking around. I said, so where did you get smicha? He said, Hebrew Union College. So I thought he was joking around again, like, okay, funny. So then a few minutes later, I said, so come on, tell me, where did you really get smicha? He said, Hebrew Union College. The guy was a Reform rabbi. And he says, he told me at first he was fully observant. when he was graduated from Hebrew
Who was
University,
this?
I forget his name.
Yeah.
He's graduated fully observant, but he would never define himself as Orthodox. He went and got a pulpit as an assistant rabbi in a Reformed temple.
Well, there's
Okay?
politics involved in that. And
It was belief. It was belief.
is that the same
Okay.
thing as orthopraxis?
A little bit. What happens is Reformed Judaism, with some branches of Reformed Judaism, they say, listen, you can choose from our tradition ways of enhancing your spirituality. So there's a mikveh in town for considered Reformed Jews, and it's not just for their conversions when they want to use mikveh. It's also certain women like the spiritual experience of going to mikveh. Okay, and because what they do is and this is an outgrowth in certain ways of the Kiruv movement, because the Kiruv movement starts selling this religion. Like I saw one thing that pushed Kiruv, and it talked about this woman who once a month drove an hour to go to a mikveh once a month. She found it to be a worthwhile. She didn't keep a kosher home. She wasn't Shomer Shabbos, but she followed these laws because she found it so enhancing and so important for the marriage. It's very nice. So this was said over in this little pamphlet I was reading about Kiruv, trying to say, you see, this is something people should get involved in. It enhances marriage. The point of the matter is, you basically missed the point of orthodoxy. That's exactly what Reform Judaism argues. Reform Judaism argues, and I remember a Reform rabbi, a guy by the name of Ray Zwerin from Denver, Colorado. Okay, I remember hearing him speak once, and basically, he basically said something like, "Well, the difference between me and him, he said, he says Nasa before Nishma." Right? Of course, there's value in doing mitzvahs, but you got to find the value. Just doing the mitzvahs without value, you miss the whole point. Now, he's actually more right-wing or Reform, but other Reform rabbis basically say, if it enhances you, fine. If it doesn't enhance you, don't do it. But the point is that they see value in it. But what it comes down to is, how do I relate to that? How does Orthodox, from a perspective, what is this group?
Okay, now going back to a point that you've made a couple of times, you said that the line that is drawn in who is considered a Jew is Messianic Jewry, and why is that?
Who?
Messianic Jews.
We have to
and
see,
why is that?
they're Jewish because they're born to a Jewish mother, but somehow we're not going to let the Messianic day school get support from UJA.
That's right. But what it comes down to is being threatened.
Mm-hmm.
If we feel threatened by Christianity around us and other religions, Muslim religions around us, and these people have embraced that other religion in their own way, then that threatens us. But then the next question is, who is the we?
Right.
Because the we in the more right-wing communities would draw the line very differently.
Right.
They would cut off before Reform. They would cut off before Conservative.
Right.
So now you have to say, okay, who is the we? Is the we the UJA, or is the we the Chabad Lubavitch movement, or who is the we?
What you're getting at is exactly the point here. Who are the we? Right. That's exactly it. And to do that, you have to define Jewishness in terms of a way. Now, the fact is, you define it halakhically, you can define it in a non-halakhic way. Then what is the Jewishness of our society? The point is I want to deal with it in a certain way tonight. There's other ways of approaching the topic, but that's exactly it. With Jewishness are a group. When you say you're a Jew, you're saying you're a member of a certain group. And really, in a certain way, what you're talking about is a definition of a group that somehow we haven't really worked out, but somehow we sort of apply it, and we don't really know what we're articulating. And that's why I wrote this. That's why I have this article from the Insight, which was a 3-part article I wrote called "Definitions and Limits of the Group." Because that's really what it's about, the first level. What exactly is the group? Okay, how do we go about defining a group? And in certain ways, that definition, now, there's a halakhic definition, Okay? Born to a Jewish mother doesn't define the group. Born to a Jewish mother is the criteria for membership in the group. But then you're left with a real powerful issue. What's the group? Okay? Now, the truth is, though, is what people don't recognize is that really in halacha there is a twofold part to the definition of the group. There's being a member of the group, and then there's being a member of a group in good standing. Okay? So if you just look at the Rambam says, yeah, of course, you're born to a Jewish mother, you're Jewish. That's not the issue. However, the Rambam, after he states the 13 principles of faith, the Gimli Karim, where she presents this at the end of his introduction to his commentary on Chelek, which is in the Talmud Bavli, the last chapter of Sanhedrin, of Tractate Sanhedrin, he says that a person who is an over-avera does sins, but believes in the Gimli Karim, he's a Jew like anyone else. Does sins. A person who believes in the 13 principles of faith but does sins, eats treifas, something like that, that person is a Jew in good standing like anyone else. You have to love him, you have to take care of him, and so forth. Obviously, he does sins, and God will demand compensation for the sins, but he's a Jew in good standing. But he says, someone who doesn't believe in the 13 principles of faith, Rambam, someone who doesn't believe in the 13 principles of faith, mitzvah l'sono. There's a commandment to hate that person. Okay? Okay? And basically says this person has lost his like, he's a major Jew, but he's not a Jew in good standing. Okay? So he defines the fact that there's a Jewish group, and there's members, and these are the members, and there's members in good standing, members aren't good standing. Now then it comes to the issue,
people think why does he tell them to hate them?
At that point in time. If they do tshuva, then they become someone you can love again. Okay? But at that point in time, mitzvah l'sono. Now, if the guy comes around and does tshuva, then he's back on the good side. But then what's interesting is that makes a much more complicated definition of a Jew. There's a Jew, and there's a Jew in good standing and a Jew not in good standing. That's the way he works it. Okay? Which basically has a Jew in not in good standing as a person who doesn't believe in certain principles of faith. The problem we have in our world today is that outside of Orthodoxy, okay, no branch of Judaism believes in the 13 principles of faith. Okay, conservative Reform Judaism doesn't believe don't share the principles of faith. So when you had that from the Karaites, when they basically rejected the 13 principles of faith, they were off on the side. And the Rambam in Hilchos Mamrim says that the original Karaites, right, you had to hate them. The guys who actually broke away and became Karaites, they're bad
Why
dudes.
hate?
That's a good question, because by Yehoshaphat, it says in the pasuk in Divrei Yamim that you should hate these people who are those. That's what we have to get to. Why?
Did you talk about already what it means by hate? Like it's just an emotional.
Yeah, not like them. If they're down the well, yelling up and saying, I'm down this well and there's alligators about to eat me. Save me, save me, save me. You're supposed to say, gee, my hearing aid's not working. I didn't know you had an hearing aid. Yeah, it just came across 30 seconds ago. And I think in another 20 minutes when I stop hearing the screams, my hearing aid will start working again. Or if you're standing beside
To that extent.
there's a concept of
That's like Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, what? Wait a sec. Yeah, but the only thing is Jews. Non-Jews, a little bit, but there's a concept of Jordan Vein Malin. Okay, but the fact is, there's a concept of Jordan Vein Malin. If you're standing beside the Grand Canyon and you, I'm sorry. So now the Rambam then says something very fascinating. This really gets to today. The Rambam says that's only the first generation. In Hilchos Mamrim he says that the second generation, third generation, brought up as Karaites, they're comparable to a Tinuk Nishma, a child who has been captured by non-Jews and not brought up Jewishly, And the Rambam says with that person, he does not lose his standing, and you're supposed to love him and bring him back to Torah. Okay? Which means, and that basically the argument. And the argument today is, anyone who's not Orthodox in the Tinnik Nishma, even if they're even they're brought up Orthodox, doesn't mean that they're any less because of society's influences and so forth and so forth. The fact is, the Chazon Ish actually makes a point that without Nisim Nigloyim, without absolute miracles, open miracles, there's actually no one really can be defined as a real min today, a real heretic today, because there's no absolute proof, because there's no open miracles. Now, the point is though, is okay. So you have people who are not, okay, there's no mitzvah l'sono. I would say that the idea that a Jew not in good standing, there's a commandment to treat him poorly and hate him, that doesn't apply. And by the way, that's the difference between us and Osama bin Laden. Okay? Basically, it's our attitude to the world. Okay, you're not getting it right, but you're not at fault for not getting it right, okay? If you act like an SOB, then we'll be upset with you. But if you're a nice guy and you're basically doing that, but you don't know that there was that God is, took us out of Egypt, and you don't deny that or something like that, that's fine. The point is that you're a Tinnik Nishma, and therefore we are supposed to greet him welcoming. They're not as a Jew and not in good standing. Okay. The point is, how do we relate to them? Because that definition of Tinnik Nishma applies to conservative, reform, and messianics. No distinction. If they're not following our faith, the faith of halacha, then we say, hey, you haven't lost your standing as a good Jew in good standing. You may lose a few rights in certain ways. We'll say maybe you can't be an aid at a Kedushin, but we'll still greet you and welcome you as a Jew, and if you're in need, we'll give you charity and we'll help you out, and so forth and so forth. Right? The point is that doesn't make a distinction anywhere along the line. But we have a much more, colloquial understanding that still says, well, wait a second, Messianics, they're outside the group somehow. So the truth is that what is this new group that exists in our world today that sort of even feels the consciousness of Jews, that sort of says, hey, they're not believers in Orthodoxy, but we're still Yidden, they're still Jews, and so forth. But if they're over there with the Messianics, we don't want anything to do with them. How can we understand that?
Could it be that kind of line was drawn by people within the non-Orthodox community, and that's why?
But the fact is, we buy into it. How do we buy into that? How do we share into it?
The thing is that they're not all truly halakhically Jewish.
That's a separate issue. That's a separate issue. I mean, that's a further that's a further complication. It's a further complication in this issue. The fact is, it's a major distinction of that now is making the issue much more difficult, and that's really the problem in Israel, where you have people in Israel who basically really are conceptually the same as this Jew, but this one's born to a Jewish mother, this one's not born to a Jew, but really they still feel in the gut, and that's the real problem in Israel. That's the tension that we're feeling in Israel. That on one hand we're talking Gerus Halacha to maintain the halachic definition of a Jew. On the other hand, people are saying, hey, wait a second, this person is as much Jewish as I am, because really they fit the more colloquial understanding of what a Jew is. Okay? And that colloquial understanding, but the point, it isn't, but how do you deal with it? That colloquial understanding is lacking a definition. Okay? It's lacking a conceptualization. So the fact is really to work this out, I mean, what you have to do is you really have to deal with this issue of what is Jewishness.